AD 33. A simple fisherman named Simon Bar Yonah pulls nets from the Sea of Galilee. A wandering rabbi approaches and says, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." That fisherman becomes Simon Peter, the rock, Jesus' closest disciple. The man who walks on water only to sink in doubt. The one who declares Jesus is the Messiah, then denies knowing him 3 times before a rooster crows. Peter is impulsive, passionate, flawed, deeply human, and he will become the foundation of the Christian Church. 34 years later, Peter stands in Rome as Nero's persecution reaches apocalyptic violence. Christians are being burned alive as human torches, sewn into animal skins and torn apart by dogs, crucified in Nero's circus for public entertainment. Peter's fellow Christians beg him to flee. "Save yourself," they plead. "The church needs you." But Peter remembers another time he fled, the night Jesus was arrested, when fear made him deny his Lord 3 times. Not this time. This time, Peter will face his death, but not before one final, devastating moment of doubt. Rome burns, Christians die. July 19th, AD 64. Fire engulfs Rome. For 6 days, flames consume the city. 10 of 14 districts are reduced to ash. The 800-year-old temple of Jupiter, gone. Thousands dead. Hundreds of thousands homeless. Rumors spread immediately. Emperor Nero started the fire to clear space for his new palace. Whether true or not, Nero needs scapegoats. He finds them in a small, hated sect called Christians. Tacitus writes that Nero blamed Christians for the disaster and initiated the empire's first organized persecution. Christians refuse to worship the emperor, won't honor Roman gods, hold secret meetings, and speak of Rome's destruction. They're perfect targets. Arrests begin. Under torture, some confess to being Christian, if not to arson. Informants name others. An immense multitude are imprisoned. Their fate won't be quick executions. Nero wants spectacle, entertainment, terror. Peter returns to Rome. AD 67, the persecution intensifies. Peter has been strengthening the Christian community in Rome, preaching, baptizing, ordaining leaders. He's approximately 64 years old, ancient by first-century standards. He spent 3 decades traveling the Mediterranean, spreading the gospel. Jerusalem, Antioch, Asia Minor, and finally Rome, the heart of the empire, where Christianity is taking root among slaves, immigrants, and even some aristocrats. But Rome has become a death trap. Every day, Christians disappear into the Mamertine Prison beneath Capitoline Hill, a horrific underground dungeon where prisoners rot in darkness. Those who survive prison face execution in Nero's circus on Vatican Hill. Fellow Christians urge Peter to leave. "You're too important," they say. "The church can't lose you. Save yourself. Continue the mission elsewhere." Eventually, Peter agrees. Late one night, he slips out of Rome, walking south along the Via Appia, the ancient highway leading away from the city. Quo Vadis, Domine? About a mile outside Rome, near a place called Campus Rediculi, Peter encounters a figure walking toward him in the darkness. As the figure draws closer, Peter recognizes the impossible. It's Jesus, the risen Christ, heading toward Rome. Peter stops, stunned. In Latin he asks, "Quo vadis, Domine?" "Lord, where are you going?" Jesus looks at Peter with infinite sadness and says, "Eo Romam iterum crucifigi." I am going to Rome to be crucified again. Then he disappears. Peter stands alone on the dark road, understanding flooding through him. Jesus is going to be crucified again, through Peter. If Peter flees, Christ suffers abandonment again. If Peter runs, he denies his Lord again. just as he did 34 years ago in that courtyard when he swore 3 times he didn't know Jesus. Peter turns around. He walks back toward Rome, back toward certain death, back toward the cross he knows is waiting. But this time there will be no denial. This time he will not run. Arrested and imprisoned. Roman soldiers arrest Peter shortly after his return. They drag him to the Mamertine Prison, 2 underground cells carved from rock, accessible only through a hole in the ceiling. The lower chamber, the Tullianum, is completely dark. No windows, no ventilation, just stone walls and the stench of human waste. Prisoners are lowered through the ceiling hole and forgotten. Many die of starvation or disease before execution. According to tradition, Peter doesn't despair. He preaches to his guards, Processus and Martinianus, who convert to Christianity and are later honored as saints. He strengthens fellow Christian prisoners, baptizing some using water that miraculously springs from the prison floor. Peter has faced death before, escaped from Herod's prison in Jerusalem through miraculous intervention. But this time, there will be no angel, no rescue. This time, God's plan requires Peter's blood. The sentence: crucifixion. After months of imprisonment, Peter is sentenced to death by crucifixion. Crucifixion is reserved for slaves, rebels, and the lowest criminals, designed to maximize suffering and humiliation. Victims are stripped naked, flogged until their backs are raw flesh, then nailed or tied to wooden crosses and left to die over hours or days as asphyxiation, shock, and exposure slowly kill them. It's Rome's most degrading execution method, a public spectacle of state power over the powerless. Peter knows this death intimately. He watched Jesus die this way, saw the nails driven through his wrists, watched him struggle for breath, each gasp agony as his weight pulled on pierced hands, heard him cry out in abandonment. Peter fled that day, hiding while his Lord suffered. Now 34 years later, Peter will face the same death. But he makes one final request, a request that will echo through 2 millennia of Christian history. Crucify me upside down. When soldiers prepare Peter's cross, he makes his plea: crucify me upside down. I am not worthy to die as my Lord died. Origen, writing in the 3rd century, records Peter's words. Peter was crucified at Rome with his head downwards, as he himself had desired to suffer. Jerome adds that Peter insisted on this because he was unworthy to be crucified in the same manner as his Lord. The Romans comply, not out of mercy, but because inverted crucifixion is actually worse. Crucifixion kills through asphyxiation, as the victim's weight makes breathing increasingly difficult. Upside down, blood rushes to the head, increasing pressure, intensifying pain. The agony is prolonged. Death takes even longer. Peter has chosen a more painful death as an act of humility, turning his execution into one final confession. I am not worthy. Even in death, I am the lesser. Christ alone deserves the glory. The death on Vatican Hill. They crucify Peter in Nero's circus on Vatican Hill, the same arena where Christians are burned as torches, torn apart by beasts, and executed for public entertainment. Crowds gather. Some jeer, some weep. Peter hangs upside down, blood pooling in his head, vision blurring red, lungs struggling to draw breath against gravity's cruel pressure. The pain is unimaginable. His arms scream. His legs cramp. Blood pounds in his skull. Hours pass. According to tradition, Peter doesn't curse his executioners or cry out in agony. He preaches. Even inverted, dying, he proclaims Christ. Early church fathers write that his final words encouraged fellow Christians, reminded them of Jesus' teachings, strengthened their resolve. The fisherman who once denied Jesus 3 times now confesses him with his final breaths. The rock, who crumbled in fear, now stands, hangs, unshakable in faith, buried where basilicas rise. Peter dies on Vatican Hill, his body taken down and buried nearby in a simple grave. Early Christians mark the spot. By AD 90, Clement of Rome confirms Peter died in Rome during Nero's persecution. By the 2nd century, pilgrims visit his tomb. Emperor Constantine builds a basilica over it in AD 324. That basilica eventually becomes St. Peter's Basilica, the largest church in Christendom, built literally on the bones of a crucified fisherman. Excavations beneath St. Peter's in the 1940s uncovered a 1st century cemetery and a grave marked with early Christian graffiti, Petros Eni, Peter is here. Whether those bones are actually Peter's remains, disputed, but the tradition is ancient and unbroken. The man crucified upside down on Vatican Hill was buried there, and the Catholic Church literally rose from his grave. The symbol of the inverted cross. Today the inverted cross is called the Cross of St. Peter or the Petrine Cross. For centuries it symbolized Christian humility, the recognition that we are unworthy of Christ's sacrifice. Popes use it as their symbol, representing their role as Peter's successors. The papal throne features inverted crosses. It's everywhere in Vatican iconography. Ironically, modern culture has twisted this meaning. Horror films use inverted crosses as symbols of evil or satanic rebellion, the exact opposite of its true meaning. What Peter intended as ultimate humility, I'm not worthy to die like Christ, has been perverted into anti-Christian imagery. The symbol of a man who loved Jesus so much he chose a worse death has become, in popular culture, a symbol of rejecting Jesus. Peter, who joked while being roasted alive, would probably find that darkly amusing. The legacy, from denier to martyr. 3 denials. That's how Peter's story almost ended. 3 times, terrified in a courtyard, he swore he didn't know Jesus. The rooster crowed. Jesus looked at him. Peter wept bitterly. That should have been the end, the disciple who failed when it mattered most. But Jesus restored him. 3 times Jesus asked, "Do you love me?" 3 times Peter answered yes, and Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." The denier became the shepherd. The coward became the rock. The man who ran became the man who returned. On Vatican Hill, hanging upside down, dying slowly in deliberate agony, Peter completed his redemption. He didn't just die for Christ. He died worse than Christ, out of love and humility. That's the legacy of Peter. Not perfection, but transformation. Not fearlessness, but courage despite fear. Not worthiness, but grace that makes the unworthy worthy. The fisherman who sank while walking on water ultimately walked all the way to Rome to die upside down. And in that inverted death, Christianity found its foundation, built not on rock that never crumbles, but on broken rock that Jesus himself put back together.